He thought he had everything. Julian Vance, with his tailored suit and a fortune built on ruthless ambition, slid into the plush booth at Aurea, Chicago's temple of modern gastronomy. Beside him, Chloe Jennings, a beautiful distraction half his age, sparkled like the champagne in their flutes. This was his life now, effortless, opulent, and free. He was celebrating a new acquisition, another feather in his gilded cap. Then he saw her across the restaurant, his ex-wife, Eleanor. And she wasn't just there. She was radiant, her hand resting on a burgeoning baby bump, a baby he knew nothing about. Seated with her was Marcus Thorne, the titan of tech, a man whose power dwarfed his own. Julian's perfectly curated world shattered in an instant. The air in Aurea was a carefully composed symphony of hushed conversations, the delicate clink of silverware on porcelain, and the distant, almost subliminal hum of the city's elite at play. For Julian Vance, it was the soundtrack of his victory. The restaurant, perched on the 40th floor of a downtown skyscraper, offered a god's-eye view of Chicago, its grid of lights a glittering testament to human ambition. His ambition. "Isn't it breathtaking?" Chloe whispered, her voice a breathy mix of awe and adoration. She leaned closer, her perfume, something expensive and floral, clouding his senses. Her fingers, light as a moth's wing, traced the lapel of his Tom Ford jacket. "You deserve this, Julian. All of it." He gave her the smile he reserved for moments like these. Practiced, confident, a little distant. "We deserve it," he corrected, though he didn't really believe it. He had earned this. Chloe was simply a beautiful accessory to his success, a living, breathing trophy that affirmed his status. She was uncomplicated in a way Eleanor had never been. Eleanor. Even the thought of her name was an unwelcome intrusion, a ghost at his feast. Their divorce had been finalized 6 months ago, a brutal, messy affair that had carved a chunk out of his fortune and a larger one out of his public image. He'd told himself it was for the best. Eleanor, with her quiet strength and unnerving ability to see past his bullshit, had become a mirror he couldn't stand to look in anymore. She wanted authenticity, emotional connection, a partner. He wanted an audience. "To the new acquisition," Chloe said, raising her glass. Her eyes, the color of warm honey, were fixed on him. "To Vance Capital, continuing to conquer the world." He tapped his glass against hers. The crystal chimed, a perfect, clear note. "To conquering," he agreed, taking a long, satisfying sip of the Dom Perignon. The bubbles fizzed on his tongue, a fleeting, sparkling pleasure. Just like Chloe. Just like this whole night. The sommelier, a man whose posture suggested a lifetime of balancing priceless bottles, approached their table. Julian was in the middle of ordering a ridiculously expensive vintage of Chateau Margaux when his gaze drifted across the room. It was a reflexive habit, a constant scan for rivals, allies, opportunities. But he wasn't prepared for what he saw. There, in a secluded corner booth with the best view of the city, was Eleanor. The sight of her was a physical blow, knocking the air from his lungs. She was different. The last time he'd seen her, in a sterile lawyer's office, she'd been pale and drawn, her eyes shadowed with a grief he'd refused to acknowledge was his fault. Tonight, she glowed. Her auburn hair was styled in soft waves, and she wore a simple, elegant emerald green dress that hugged her figure in a way that made his throat go dry. It wasn't just the dress. There was a fullness to her, a serene confidence he hadn't seen in years, and then he saw it. Her hand resting protectively on her abdomen. An unmistakable gentle curve. Pregnant, the word detonated in his mind, silencing the restaurant's symphony. Pregnant, Eleanor was pregnant. The champagne soured in his stomach, turning to acid. A cold dread, sharp and swift, pierced the armor of his arrogance. How? When? He did the math, his mind racing, a frantic calculation of months and dates. It was possible, barely, but it was possible. His baby? The thought was a chaotic mix of horror and a sudden, unwelcome possessiveness. Then he saw the man she was with. It wasn't just any man. It was Marcus Thorne. Thorne was a legend in the tech world, the CEO of Ether, a company whose innovations were fundamentally reshaping global communication. He was older, maybe early 50s, with silver-streaked hair and a face that looked like it had been carved from granite. He wasn't handsome in the conventional way Julian was. He possessed something far more potent, an aura of unshakable power and intelligence. He was leaning forward, listening to Eleanor with an intensity that made Julian's blood run cold. He wasn't just dining with her. He was captivated by her. Chloe's voice broke through the fog. "Julian, are you okay? You look like you've seen a ghost." He had. He'd seen the ghost of the life he'd discarded, and it had come back, fuller and more vibrant than he could have imagined, on the arm of a king. "I'm fine," he lied, his voice tight. He forced his eyes away from Eleanor and back to the wine list, but the words swam before him, meaningless squiggles on a page. The Chateau Margaux suddenly seemed like a cheap, pathetic indulgence. His heart was hammering against his ribs, a frantic, trapped bird. He saw the way Marcus Thorne smiled at Eleanor, a genuine, warm smile that reached his eyes. He saw the way Eleanor laughed, a sound Julian hadn't heard in years, a free and open expression of joy. It was a private world, a fortress of two, and Julian was on the outside, looking in through a pane of glass, suddenly feeling like the poorest man in the room. The shock wasn't just seeing her pregnant. The shock was seeing her happy. Without him, the drive back to his penthouse was a silent, tense affair. The city lights smeared past the windows of the chauffeured Maybach, the glittering grid that had seemed like his kingdom, now feeling like a cage. Chloe, sensing his dark mood, had retreated into a fragile silence, occasionally glancing at him with a mixture of confusion and hurt. She kept trying to touch his hand, and he kept pulling away. "Julian, what happened back there?" she finally asked, as the elevator ascended in a smooth, silent rush. "You completely shut down. Was it that woman?" He didn't answer. He couldn't. Admitting it would give the moment a reality he wasn't ready to face. The elevator doors opened directly into his apartment, a sprawling space of glass, steel, and minimalist furniture. It was cold, impersonal, a showroom for a life rather than a home. He walked straight to the floor-to-ceiling windows, the same view as the restaurant, only higher, more isolated. "Don't you dare ignore me," Chloe said, her voice sharp now. She kicked off her heels, the sound echoing in the cavernous room. "I am not just some girl you can parade around and then dismiss. You saw your ex-wife, didn't you? What of it? You're with me now." Julian turned, his face a mask of controlled fury. "It's none of your business." "None of my business," she scoffed, crossing her arms. "You drag me to this ridiculously expensive dinner to show me off, and the second you see her, I cease to exist. That makes it my business." "What do you want, Chloe?" he snapped. "You want the money, the lifestyle. You have it. Don't pretend this is about anything more." The words were cruel, and he knew it. He saw the flash of pain in her eyes before it was replaced by a hard, calculating glint. It was a look he recognized. It was the look of a survivor. "You think you have me all figured out, don't you, Julian?" she said softly, her voice dangerously calm. "You think I'm just a pretty face with an empty head and an open palm. Be careful. You have no idea who I am." She turned and walked towards the guest bedroom, her stride full of a defiant anger he hadn't seen before. The door clicked shut, leaving him alone in the sterile silence of his penthouse. Her words hung in the air, unsettling him more than her anger. "You have no idea who I am." He was left alone with his thoughts, and they all spiraled back to Eleanor. Pregnant. The image of her hand on her belly was seared into his brain. He felt a primal, gut-wrenching jealousy that had nothing to do with love and everything to do with possession. She had been his. Her body, her future, her loyalty. He had taken it all for granted, and then he had thrown it away for something cheaper, easier. He remembered their last year together. The fights, the silences. He had been consumed by work, by the relentless pursuit of more. A bigger deal, a larger company, a higher net worth. Eleanor had tried to reach him. She'd planned vacations he'd cancelled. She'd made dinners he'd shown up hours late for, his mind still in the boardroom. She'd begged him to talk to her, to be present. "I feel like I'm married to a ghost, Julian," she'd said one night, her voice trembling. "A ghost that just pays the bills." He'd called her ungrateful. He'd told her she didn't understand the pressure he was under. He had made her feel small so he could feel big. The truth, the ugly, secret truth, was that he was terrified. A competitor was trying for a hostile takeover of his first company, the one he'd built from the ground up. He was leveraged to the hilt, one bad deal away from ruin. He couldn't tell her. Admitting that weakness to Eleanor, whose belief in him had been his foundation, felt like a greater failure than bankruptcy itself. So he pushed her away, manufacturing a distance that hardened into a permanent rift. He started seeing Chloe, a mindless ego boost, and made sure Eleanor found out. It was a coward's way out, and it had worked perfectly. Now, standing in his empty palace in the sky, he was forced to confront the wreckage. He had saved his company, yes. The acquisition they'd celebrated tonight was the final move that secured his empire. He had won. But what had he lost? The thought of Marcus Thorne with Eleanor was salt in the wound. Thorne was everything Julian aspired to be, but with an added layer of class and respectability he could never quite achieve. Thorne built things that lasted, things that mattered. Julian just bought and sold, a predator in a jungle of his own making. And now that predator felt like prey. He imagined Thorne and Eleanor together, their quiet conversations, their shared laughter. He pictured Thorne's hand on her pregnant stomach. Was it Thorne's baby? The timeline didn't quite work. The divorce was 6 months ago. She was clearly 5 or 6 months along. It had to be his. The realization hit him not with joy, but with a cold, terrifying sense of responsibility. A child. A permanent, unbreakable link to the woman he had so thoroughly discarded. A link that would bring him face to face with her, and with Marcus Thorne, again and again. He poured himself a whiskey, the amber liquid sloshing in the crystal tumbler. The polished surfaces of his home reflected a distorted image of himself, a man alone, haunted by the life he had destroyed. The victory he'd celebrated just hours ago now felt utterly, sickeningly hollow. Eleanor felt Marcus's hand cover hers as the waiter cleared their dessert plates. His touch was warm, steadying. "Are you all right, Elle?" he asked, his voice low and concerned. "You've been a million miles away for the last 10 minutes. She forced a smile, pulling her gaze away from the table where she'd seen Julian. He and his new girlfriend were gone now. "I'm fine, just a bit tired." Marcus's eyes, a sharp, intelligent blue, searched her face. He saw too much. He always did. It was him, wasn't it? "Vance?" She nodded, letting out a breath she didn't realize she'd been holding. "I didn't expect to see him. Not here. The world is small for people in our tax bracket. Marcus said, with a wry, humorless smile. "But Chicago is a big city. We don't have to come here again." "It's not the restaurant's fault," she said, managing a small, genuine smile this time. "And I'm not going to let him chase me out of my favorite spots." She placed her other hand over his. "Thank you, Marcus, for everything. For tonight." "Eleanor, you don't ever need to thank me," he said, his expression softening. "Your father was my mentor. He gave me my first major investment when no one else would. Helping his daughter rebuild her life and launch her own business is the very least I can do to repay that debt. Besides," he added, a twinkle in his eye, "your business plan for Nest and Nurture is brilliant. I'm an investor, remember? I expect to see a healthy return." Nest and Nurture was her baby, in more ways than one. It was an online platform and concierge service for new parents, providing curated resources, expert support, and ethically sourced products. It was born from her own experiences, from the loneliness and confusion she'd felt in the early days of her pregnancy, navigating a new life on her own after her marriage imploded. Seeing Julian tonight had been a jolt, but it wasn't the gut punch it would have been 6 months ago. The Julian she saw tonight, with his flashy girlfriend and his arrogant posture, was a stranger. He was the man he had become in the last years of their marriage, not the man she had fallen in love with. The real pain came from the memory of that earlier man, the ambitious but kind dreamer who had shared his fears with her, the man who had held her and promised they would build a life together. That man was long gone. The pregnancy, that was the complicated part. It had happened in the chaotic final weeks of their marriage. One night, after a bitter fight, there had been a desperate, tear-filled reconciliation. A moment of confusing passion that felt like a final, dying ember of their love. She'd discovered she was pregnant 2 weeks after he'd asked for the divorce. She had tried to tell him. She had called, her hand trembling, the positive test sitting on the bathroom counter. He hadn't picked up. She left a message. "Julian, we need to talk. It's important." His lawyer had called her back the next day. Julian, the lawyer stated coldly, would only communicate through legal counsel from that point on. The message was clear. He wanted out, no matter what. The cruelty of it had been breathtaking. So she had made a decision. She would do it alone. This child would not be a weapon in a bitter divorce or a chain to a man who didn't want them. This child would be hers, a symbol of her own strength and a new beginning. Marcus had been her savior. A friend of her late father's, he had reached out after hearing about the divorce, offering his support. When she, on a whim, shared her business idea with him, he had seen its potential immediately. He hadn't just offered money. He'd offered mentorship, guidance, and respect. He treated her as a peer, an entrepreneur. He had helped her find the confidence Julian had spent years chipping away. There was no romance between them, only a deep, abiding friendship and professional respect. But she knew how it must have looked tonight to Julian, and a small, vindictive part of her was glad. "Let him think what he wants," Marcus said, as if reading her mind. "His opinion of you no longer matters. All that matters is you, this baby, and the empire you're about to build." He squeezed her hand. "Now, let's get you home. You have a pitch with the board of pre-seed investors tomorrow, and you need your rest." As they walked out of the restaurant, Eleanor felt a profound sense of peace settle over her. Seeing Julian hadn't broken her. It had reaffirmed her choices. He was her past, a painful but closed chapter. Her future was waiting, and for the first time in a long time, it felt bright. The next 2 weeks were a special kind of hell for Julian. The image of Eleanor and Marcus Thorne was burned into his consciousness. He became obsessed. He had his security team run a discreet background check. The report came back and only deepened the mystery and his paranoia. Thorne and Eleanor had been seen together multiple times. Business lunches, gallery openings, a charity gala. Thorne was a lead investor in a new startup. The startup's name, Nest and Nurture. The founder and CEO, Eleanor Reed. Reed. She had taken back her maiden name. The act felt like a deliberate erasure of him. Another twist of the knife. He found the company's fledgling website. It was sleek, compassionate, and smart. It was everything Eleanor was. It offered services he didn't even know existed, targeting a market he never knew was so lucrative. And it was backed by the Midas touch of Marcus Thorne. She wasn't just surviving, she was thriving in a way that was a direct indictment of his failure as a husband. His work suffered. He was distracted in meetings, irritable with his staff. His focus, once laser-sharp, was now fractured. And Chloe was becoming a problem. She had dropped the act of the doe-eyed admirer. In its place was a woman who was shrewd and demanding. She knew he was off balance, and she was using it to her advantage. "I saw this bracelet at Cartier today," she'd say, showing him a picture on her phone. An apology for being such a jerk would look really nice in diamonds. Or, "I think we should go to Monaco for the Grand Prix. I need a change of scenery. You owe me," he acquiesced, throwing money at her to keep her quiet, to keep her from asking the questions he didn't want to answer. But it was a temporary fix. The unease about her lingered. "You have no idea who I am." What did that mean? He had his team look into her too. The initial report was bland. Chloe Jennings, 26, from a middle-class family in Ohio, moved to Chicago to pursue modeling, had some minor success, now worked as a brand ambassador, which was code for a high-end party girl. Nothing seemed out of the ordinary, and yet his gut told him he was missing something. The final straw came during a board meeting for Vance Capital. They were discussing quarterly projections, and Julian was supposed to be leading the conversation. But his mind was elsewhere, replaying the scene at Aria, trying to decipher the look on Thorne's face. "Julian," it was his CFO, David Chen. "Your thoughts on the revised Q4 forecast?" Julian blinked, pulled back to the present. "The forecast? Yes, it's fine." David stared at him, his expression one of pure disbelief. "Fine? Julian, the projection shows a 12% downturn in the European market. Our new acquisition is underperforming. It's anything but fine." The entire boardroom was looking at him. He saw doubt in their eyes. The infallible Julian Vance, the man with the golden gut, was faltering. Panic, cold and sharp, seized him. He straightened his tie, grasping for the familiar cloak of authority. "I've reviewed the numbers, David," he said, his voice harder than he intended. "It's a temporary dip, market volatility. I'm not concerned." But he was. He was deeply concerned. He'd pushed for this acquisition, overriding the cautious advice of his board. He had needed a big, flashy win to distract himself from the divorce, to prove to the world, and to himself, that he was still on top. Now it looked like it could be a massive misstep. That night, unable to sleep, he did something he hadn't done in years. He went into his home office and pulled out a box from the back of a closet. It was labeled Eleanor. Inside were old photos, letters, mementos from the early years of their relationship. Him and her, 20-somethings, smiling and carefree on a trip to Italy. A picture of them on the day they bought their first small apartment, covered in paint but beaming. In every photo, he saw the man she had fallen in love with, the one he barely recognized anymore. And then he found it. A crumpled brochure for a fertility clinic. It was from 2 years ago. He remembered now. They had been trying for a baby. For over a year they had tried. The negative tests, the scheduled appointments, the quiet disappointment that had slowly become a wedge between them. He had been the one to give up. "Maybe it's for the best, Ellie," he'd said, the words tasting like ash. "With my schedule, it's just not the right time." It was a lie. The doctors had found an issue, a low probability on his end. The failure was his. The shame of it, the feeling of inadequacy, was another weakness he couldn't bear to admit. So he'd shut down that part of their life, burying the problem instead of facing it with her. He had blamed his work, making her feel like her desire for a family was an unreasonable demand. Staring at the brochure, the truth hit him like a physical blow. The baby Eleanor was carrying couldn't be his. It was a biological impossibility. The relief was immediate and overwhelming, a rush of cool air in a suffocating room. But it was followed by something far worse. The baby wasn't his. The jealousy, the possessiveness. It was all based on a lie. Eleanor had moved on completely. The child was another man's. It was Thorne's. She had built a new life, a new family, on the ashes of their marriage. He felt a rage so pure and white-hot it scared him. It wasn't just jealousy anymore. It was humiliation. He, Julian Vance, had been replaced. So easily. So completely. In that moment of blind fury, he made a decision. A terrible, reckless decision. If Eleanor and Marcus Thorne were building an empire, he would tear it down. He would find a weakness in her little startup, a flaw in Thorne's armor. He would remind them both who he was. He wasn't just a ghost of Eleanor's past. He was a titan of industry, and he would not be discarded. Eleanor stood before the small board of investors, her voice clear and steady. Marcus sat at the far end of the table, his expression neutral, giving her the space to command the room on her own. She walked them through her 5-year growth plan for Nest and Nurture, her passion for the project evident in every word. "Our mission is simple," she concluded, looking each investor in the eye. "To empower parents with confidence and community. We're not just selling products. We're building a support system for the most important journey of their lives." When she finished, the room was silent for a moment, and then the lead investor, a sharp woman named Sarah Chen, smiled. "Ms. Reed, that was one of the most compelling and well-researched pitches I've seen all year. We're in." A wave of relief and exhilaration washed over Eleanor. She shook their hands, her heart soaring. This was real. It was happening. As she and Marcus left the building and stepped out into the crisp autumn air, he finally broke his professional demeanor, enveloping her in a warm hug. "You were magnificent, Elle. Your father would have been so proud." Tears pricked her eyes. "Thank you, Marcus. I couldn't have done it without you." "Nonsense. I just opened a door. You walked through it all on your own," he said. His driver pulled up to the curb. "Let me give you a ride home." During the drive, her phone buzzed. It was a notification from a financial news outlet. The headline made her blood run cold. "Vance Capital announces strategic pivot into parenting and lifestyle sector. Eyes aggressive market takeover." Eleanor's hand flew to her mouth. She read the article aloud, her voice trembling. Julian was launching a subsidiary, a direct competitor to Nest and Nurture. It was to be called Apex Family, and it promised to leverage Vance Capital's vast resources to dominate the fragmented, parent-focused market. The language was predatory, militaristic. It wasn't just business, it was a declaration of war. "He can't do this," she whispered, her earlier triumph turning to ashes. "He's going to crush us before we even get off the ground." Marcus's face was grim. He read the article on his own phone, his jaw tight. "This isn't a business move, Eleanor. This is a personal attack." He looked at her, his eyes full of a steely resolve. "He's coming after you, which means he's coming after me." "Why?" she cried, tears of frustration and fear streaming down her face. "Why is he so determined to destroy me?" "Because men like Julian don't understand building things," Marcus said, his voice dangerously quiet. "They only understand breaking them. He sees your happiness, your success with me at your side, and he perceives it as a threat to his ego. He thinks this child is mine." Eleanor froze, the unspoken truth hanging in the air between them. Marcus looked at her, his gaze unwavering. "The baby isn't mine, is it, Eleanor?" She shook her head, a sob catching in her throat. "No, I never thought it was," he said gently. "But Julian does. And that's what's fueling this. He can't stand the thought of us building a family together." He paused, taking a deep breath. "He's made a powerful enemy today. He just doesn't know it yet. We're going to fight him, Eleanor, and we're going to win." But as Eleanor looked out the window, the city lights blurring through her tears, she felt a terrifying premonition. Julian's capacity for destruction was immense. This wasn't just about business anymore. It was about survival. The first attack from Apex Family was swift and brutal. They launched a massive, multi-million-dollar marketing campaign, flooding social media and television with slick ads that essentially copied Nest and Nurture's core message, but with a colder, more corporate gloss. They headhunted two of Eleanor's key software developers, offering them salaries she couldn't possibly match. Then came the smear campaign. Anonymous articles began appearing on financial blogs, questioning the viability of Eleanor's business model, hinting at mismanagement, and casting doubt on Marcus Thorne's judgment for backing such a vanity project. Julian was relentless. He was operating from a place of pure, scorched earth rage. Every success for Apex Family was a strike against Eleanor, a way to reclaim the power he felt he had lost. But the victory felt hollow. His team was working around the clock, but the new division was a massive cash drain. The board was growing anxious, and his personal life was unraveling. Chloe had become more brazen. One evening, he came home to find her in his office, her laptop open. "What the hell are you doing in here?" he demanded, his voice echoing in the silent penthouse. She didn't flinch. She closed the laptop slowly, a smirk playing on her lips. "Just admiring your empire. It's very impressive. All these numbers, these projections, especially the ones for Apex Family. You're bleeding money, Julian. A lot of it." A cold dread washed over him. "How did you get my password?" "You're not as clever as you think you are," she said, standing up and walking towards him. She was wearing one of his dress shirts, and nothing else. "You use the same password for everything. The name of your first dog. Zeus. A bit on the nose for a god complex, don't you think?" He grabbed her arm, his fingers digging into her flesh. "Who are you working for?" She winced, but her eyes held his, defiant and unafraid. "Let go of me, Julian. Answer the question," he roared. "Or what? You'll throw me out? Cut me off?" She laughed, a sharp, bitter sound. "Go ahead. It doesn't matter anymore. I already have what I need." He let her go, stunned into silence. She rubbed her arm, her smirk gone, replaced by a look of cold contempt. "You really are a fool," she said. "You surround yourself with trophies and yes-men, and you think it makes you powerful. You never once bothered to look at me, to actually see who I am." She walked to the window, looking down at the city. "My father worked for a small manufacturing company in Ohio. For 30 years, he poured his life into that place. Then, 10 years ago, a firm called Vance Capital acquired it in a hostile takeover. They promised to streamline operations. That's what you called it. What it meant was they fired 2/3 of the workforce, including my father, 2 months shy of him qualifying for his full pension. The story hit Julian like a punch to the gut. He remembered the acquisition vaguely. It was one of many, a faceless transaction on a spreadsheet. My father lost everything, Chloe continued, her voice thick with emotion. His job, his pension, his pride. He had a heart attack a year later. My mother said he died of a broken heart. I was 16. She turned to face him, her eyes glittering with unshed tears and pure hatred. I've spent the last 10 years waiting for a chance to get close to you, to find a way to make you pay for what you did to my family. And you just handed it all to me on a silver platter. Julian felt the floor drop out from beneath him. What did you do? He whispered. All that information on your laptop? Your projections? Your strategy for Apex? Your company's vulnerabilities? It's all on its way to a certain reporter at the Wall Street Journal who specializes in corporate malfeasance. And to your biggest competitor. Not Marcus Thorne. The other one. The one who almost took you down 5 years ago. Betrayal, complete and absolute, choked him. He had been played, manipulated from the very beginning, by a ghost from a past sin he didn't even remember committing. The ruthlessness he had always prided himself on had been turned against him, used as a weapon to orchestrate his own downfall. "Get out," he said, his voice a dead monotone. "With pleasure," Chloe said. She walked to the door, pausing with her hand on the handle. "You know, for a man who claims to be a genius, you're awfully stupid about people. You thought Eleanor was weak. You think I'm just a gold digger. You underestimate the women you wrong, Julian. That's going to be your legacy." The door closed, and Julian Vance was finally, completely, alone. He stumbled to his desk and sank into his chair, the vast, glittering city outside his window now seeming like a monument to his monumental failure. He had waged a war against Eleanor to soothe his own ego, and in doing so had left his gates completely unguarded. The enemy hadn't been outside his walls. She had been sleeping in his bed. The Wall Street Journal article was a bombshell. It detailed, with surgical precision, the financial instability of Vance Capital, the reckless spending on the Apex family vanity project, and the internal projections that showed a company on the brink of a major crisis. The stock plummeted. The board called an emergency meeting. Julian's empire was crumbling, and the world was watching. He walked into the boardroom not as a king, but as a man on his way to the gallows. The faces that looked back at him were cold, their trust irrevocably broken. David Chen, his once loyal CFO, laid out the grim reality. The article, combined with the leak to their competitor, had triggered a clause with their primary lenders. They were facing a catastrophic margin call. "There is only one way to salvage the company," David said, his voice devoid of emotion. "The board has voted. We are accepting a buyout offer." "From who?" Julian asked, though he already knew the answer. "Ether," David replied. "Marcus Thorne's company." The irony was so bitter it tasted like poison. The man he had tried to ruin was now his savior, or rather, his conqueror. Thorne wasn't just buying the company to save it. He was buying it to own him. "And a condition of the sale," David continued, avoiding Julian's gaze, "is your immediate resignation as CEO." It was over. In a matter of days, he had lost everything. His company, his fortune, his reputation. He was nothing. He didn't fight it. There was no fight left in him. He signed the papers, packed the few personal items from his office, and walked out of the building he had built, a ghost in his own life. Days turned into a week. He didn't leave his penthouse. He didn't answer his phone. He drank. He stared at the walls. He was adrift in a sea of his own making. The fury was gone, replaced by a vast, crushing emptiness. He had built his entire identity on being Julian Vance, the Titan. Without that, who was he? One afternoon there was a knock at his door. Not the polite rap of a concierge, but a firm, insistent knock. He ignored it. It came again, louder this time. With a groan, he shuffled to the door and pulled it open. Eleanor stood in the hallway. She looked tired but resolute. Her pregnancy was more pronounced now, her belly a proud, perfect globe beneath her coat. He stared at her, speechless. "Can I come in?" she asked, her voice soft but firm. He stepped back wordlessly and let her pass. She walked into the living room, her eyes taking in the disarray, the empty bottles, the discarded takeaway containers, the air thick with stale whiskey and regret. She didn't comment on it. "I read about what happened," she said, turning to face him. "I'm sorry, Julian." He let out a harsh, broken laugh. "Sorry? You should be celebrating. You won." "This wasn't a game, and nobody won," she said, her gaze steady. "Chloe came to see me. She told me everything. About her father. About what she did." "So you came here to gloat?" he snarled, the old defensive anger flaring up. "No," she said calmly. "I came to give you this." She reached into her bag and pulled out a large manila envelope, placing it on the coffee table between them. "Marcus is dissolving Apex family. He's absorbing the viable assets into Ether's portfolio, but he's shutting down the division. He asked me what I wanted to do about your personal shares, the ones that are now essentially worthless." She took a deep breath. Inside that envelope are incorporation papers and a check. He stared at the envelope as if it were a snake. "What is it?" "It's a trust," she said, "in our child's name. The check is for $5 million. It's what's left of your personal stake in the company after the buyout. Marcus could have taken it all, legally. I asked him not to." The words hit him harder than the loss of his company. "Our child." "What are you talking about?" he stammered, his mind reeling. "The baby. I can't. The doctors said..." "The doctors said it was a low probability, Julian," she said, her voice softening with a sadness that felt centuries old. "Not an impossibility. It happened. That last night, it happened." He sank onto the sofa, his head in his hands. The child was his. All this time, his rage, his jealousy, his destructive campaign, it had all been based on a lie he had told himself because he couldn't face his own inadequacy. He had tried to destroy the mother of his own child. "Why?" he whispered, his voice cracking. "Why would you do this for me, after everything I did to you?" "I'm not doing it for you," she said, and her words were not cruel, but factual. "I'm doing it for my child. They deserve to know that their father, whatever his faults, was given a chance to be better. They deserve to have a father who isn't completely broken." She looked at him, and for the first time, he saw not pity in her eyes, but a flicker of the old Eleanor, the one who had believed in him. "This isn't a handout, Julian. It's a lifeline. What you do with it is up to you. You can use it to rebuild, to start something new, something smaller, maybe something better. Or you can drink it all away. The choice is yours." She walked to the door. "Ellie, wait!" he called out, his voice hoarse. He stood up, taking a hesitant step towards her. "I'm sorry. For everything. For pushing you away. For not telling you the truth about the company. About me. For being a coward. I am so sorry." The apology felt small, inadequate, a single drop of rain on a raging fire. But it was all he had. She paused, her back to him. She didn't turn around. "I know," she said quietly. "Goodbye, Julian." And then she was gone. He stood in the center of the room, the silence pressing in on him. He looked at the envelope on the table. A trust. A chance. A lifeline from the woman he had wronged more than anyone. Tears streamed down his face, hot and shameful. They weren't tears of self-pity. Not anymore. They were tears of grief for the man he had been, and for the man he had failed to become. He picked up the envelope. His hands trembled as he opened it. Inside, he saw the legal documents, and beneath them, the check, and on a small, separate piece of paper, a sonogram picture, a tiny, perfect profile. A new life. His new life, if he was strong enough to claim it. The path to redemption would be long and agonizing, and he knew he would walk it alone. He didn't deserve to walk it with her. But for the first time in a very long time, Julian Vance saw a flicker of light in the profound darkness of his own creation. It was not the blinding glare of success, but the small, steady flame of hope. The story of Julian Vance serves as a powerful, modern parable. It's a raw look at how insecurity and ego can lead a man to tear down his own life in a desperate attempt to feel powerful. His journey through betrayal, not just from his mistress, but from his own flawed character, forces a painful confrontation with the truth. It's in losing everything, his company, his pride, and the woman he wronged, that he's finally given the chance to find himself. Eleanor's strength isn't in revenge, but in her resilience and her grace to offer a path forward, not for him, but for their child. It's a story about the difficult, messy, and ultimately necessary path to redemption. If this story of downfall and the faint glimmer of hope resonated with you, please hit that like button. Share it with someone who appreciates complex emotional drama, and subscribe for more stories that explore the depths of the human heart.